So my name is Bri Lafferty, and my crazy journey involved metaphysical experiences, paranormal experiences, a rare, chronic, incurable neurological movement that led, all those led up to my near-death experience, which really propelled me into a passionate career as a death and spiritual doula.
I know you mentioned that this was an incurable disease that you couldn't recover from, and you now are recovered. So just let's backtrack a little bit. What was the disease and how did it affect your life?
Yeah, it took 8 years to get diagnosed. The symptoms started when I was 10, and I was diagnosed at 18 with myclonis dystonia. And that is a rare, incurable neurological movement disorder. And between my near-death and some more spiritual learning and diving into learning, I was able to actually cure this disorder.
Wow. What are the symptoms like? How does it present?
Yeah, so there's a lot of symptoms, and for a long time I was getting like 8, 10 different labels of all these disorders. And my mom she grew up in a medical family household and realized that it's got to fit in Occam's razor, meaning the simplest possibility that explains the most. And so I had tremors that were so bad that I wasn't able to text, type, do my eyeliner, put in earrings, button up my clothes. I tremored so bad, like advanced stage Parkinson's. I would also have involuntary muscle movements, which could turn into non-epileptic myoclonic seizures. So, I mean, just twitching all over the place, flopping around like a fish. I would hit walls, myself, doors. I would throw things. I broke so many phones and glassware and just a lot of things. And it was very painful because I would hit things. And I'd also have muscle rigidity. And that would be generalized. So in my shoulders and my back, it was as hard as a board. So even if I got a deep tissue massage, it would only last for about 5 minutes before my muscles just re-seized. And I had them in the palms of my hands, the soles of my feet, my calves, my forearms, my neck. And then I also had nerve pain. And I described it as a Christmas tree with 2 sets of lights on it. One strand is just constantly lit and the other ones are blinking. And wow. The tree was my body and the lights were those pain signals. So those were the physical symptoms. But then we move into the psychological issues, and it came with extreme insomnia. I mean, chronic, 0 hours of sleep for days on end. Anxiety. My heart felt like it was going to race out of my chest, and just it beat so fast that I thought it would just run on out of there. Depression, OCD, and all of this is because what's going on in the brain is, one, the brain is super overactive. It's consuming all the glucose. If you see it on a scan, a normal brain consumes like this much glucose. In a myoclonic brain, like the whole brain is lit up. And then the dystonia comes from the axons, where the signal isn't going from point A to point B. And it's usually a genetic defect. So the brain is incorrectly wired, which is why it's incurable. You can't just go rewire a brain. Well, that's what conventional medicine says, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So you say it started around 10. Is there like a trigger for it, that something happens to trigger that wiring, or is it something that just started showing over time?
Yeah, so other people with the condition, it can start as soon as birth, in early ages, like 3. A lot of people end up showing symptoms around puberty, so that the puberty is sometimes the trigger. So, it could have been an environmental trigger, or just puberty kind of turned on that gene, and I started showing symptoms, and the symptoms just continued to progress up until I was able to heal from it.
Okay, so obviously you're in a lot of pain and you now have this near death. What led you to the near death experience?
Yeah, so it was a 16 years of, living in this chronic illness. My body is already fatigued. I'm already pretty hopeless. Conventional medicine said there was nothing they could do for me. I tried all the medications, a ton of holistic options or alternative medicine treatments, Chinese medicine, Reiki, hypnosis, acupuncture, chiropractic, the list really goes on. So I had kind of given up hope, and I had a feeling this condition was going to kill me. And I just had this deep rooted feeling that I would not live past 28. And, I told my mom this since I was young, and she was always pretty freaked out. But then you compile that with these paranormal experiences I also, had. And I started seeing ghosts when I was young, and then I stopped seeing ghosts and started seeing more demonic creatures or dark entities, depending on, what culture or religion tells you they are. They were just very dark and very malicious. And I started seeing those. And a previous owner of a home we lived in, their kids played with an Ouija board. And even though Ouija boards were not intended maliciously, they have unexpected consequences, such as opening portals that we don't really fully comprehend. And so we believe the portal was opened in this home, and I was already sick. I was already tired. You throw an illness on top of a girl starting puberty, puberty's hard enough. So I had no energy shield. I had no awareness. Our church didn't teach about, dark entities or ghosts or anything. They just said, oh, if you're saved, you won't be hurt. You won't be harmed. So I wasn't really worried about it. And some entities from that portal ended up attaching to me in my illness and in my vulnerable state. And as the years went by, even more came in and attached, and they were very oppressive. Not possessive, I wasn't possessed by them, but I was very oppressed by them. And we were still looking, for options and anything that could possibly cure my illness. And I started seeing these entities around the same time that my symptoms started. So we weren't really sure which came first, if it was the entities that caused the illness or the illness that allowed the entities to come in. We weren't really sure, but I had basically tried to run to go live out the rest of my life as best as I could. I basically went to another state in the US to die because I knew I was going to. But as I'm there and I'm really struggling, my mom finds a thing called a spirit release therapist. And they are practitioners that are well-versed in how to release these spirits who have attached to, vulnerable people or people in general. And she found that sometimes these entities can cause these rare, incurable, crazy illnesses. And, why not try it? Other people who had kind of unexplainable, untreatable illnesses have been miraculously cured through spirit release therapy. So we tried it. We were warned that I could get a little sick, flu-like symptoms. Only, 6 years later, do I understand why. It's a movement of energy, and we're energetic beings, so you change energy drastically, and you can have physical symptoms. But I didn't understand that then. And the energies that had been attached were very powerful, very dark, and very angry. They did not want to go. So I ended up getting very sick. So I'm already sick with this illness. I'm a chronic insomniac who's fatigued from not sleeping. I'm now being harassed by these entities that are attached, because the more she worked at releasing them, the more angry and vicious they got, and they started attacking me. And so you put that on there. And this was going on for 3 weeks, and I became so flu-like sick that I knew it was because of this therapy, so I wasn't going to go to the doctors. Doctors never helped me anyway. So I was just like, well, I'll get through it. Like, I've gotten through everything. And for about 72 hours, my mom had been on the phone with me praying and trying to pray some relief to come my way. And just, it was getting more and more hellacious. So 2 in the morning on April 27th, 2017, I told my mom I was going to hang up to try to get some sleep. She is a wonderful, wonderful mother. I said that because I knew if I said, you need to get some sleep, she wouldn't sleep. I knew I wasn't going to, but I told her that, so maybe she could get some sleep. And when we hung up the phone, I was so exhausted. And in this state of exhaustion, I cried out. I cried out with everything. I gave up. I realized I couldn't do it anymore, and I couldn't fight this fight. And at the time, I was kind of thinking this demonic fight, but I think my soul knew I couldn't do the whole fight anymore. I could no longer do the illness. I couldn't do the paranormal craziness that I've been experiencing, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And at this point, I cried out, and I didn't know who God was. He never answered my prayers before, but I said, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. I didn't know who I was talking to, but I called out because I always believed there was something out there, but I wasn't sure what it was. So I called out and I just said, I'm done. I can't do it. And in that instant, as soon as those thoughts came over me, and I meant it with every single part of me, my soul, my heart, my mind, my body, there was a silence and a peace that just came over me. It was, these things had been ripped away from me, and there was silence, and it was like 1,000 stadiums had all been shushed, and people being whipped, the people being me. All the whippers were halted, and these 100-ton boulders had been lifted. It was the first time in my life I felt complete peace and serenity. And it was just it was ethereal. It was undescribable. And then I started feeling some tingling on the palms of my hands and my feet. And that's when I heard this big booming voice. And I'm not external, not really internal, just there, said, "Are you ready?" I didn't even hesitate to say yes. Something happened. Something answered my prayer. Yeah, yes, of course, yes. And as soon as I thought yes, once again, didn't hesitate, I left my body. And I was completely detached from this human form, Bri. I was unaware of Earth, and I was in this beautiful, black, velvety void. And I don't know why I say void. It's like nothing was there, but everything was there. It was like there was so much light, it had collapsed in on itself, and it was pure energy. And in this darkness, I understood I met the creator, I met the God, I met the source, I met the entity that answered my prayers, that had just saved me. And I knew that I was home. And it was nothing but love. Just pure love. There was absolutely no judgment, no pity, nothing but love. And it was amazing. And even though I was unaware of my body and Earth, I still had this conscious thought, am I dead? And out of the darkness, these monks appear. They're sitting cross-legged, and they've got these beautiful robes on, but they're not saying anything, but they're kind of laughing at me. And it would take me 5 years after this experience to realize they were laughing, because there's no such thing as dead. There is no such thing as death, only a transition of energy. So how silly is it to ask if you are dead when death doesn't exist? But I didn't understand why they were kind of laughing at the moment. I just thought, oh, okay, that's curious. and transitioned into this beautiful, vivid, bright, ethereal blue tunnel filled with ones and zeros. And I'm going through this as a soul body. So I don't have a body in this void. I don't have a body in this tunnel. I'm just energy. And I'm seeing ones and zeros all around me going at like warp speed. And I get the sensation that I'm being downloaded with all this information. Not aware of what specifically the information is, just that I'm being downloaded and it's a lot. Then I end up in this white area, this white room. It's not really a room, but I don't know how else to describe it. And I feel the presence of a master teacher behind me. And because of my upbringing and my culture, you know, I recognize that presence to be something like Jesus. But I feel, you know, depending on your upbringing and your religious context, it could be Muhammad, Krishna, Muhammad, these ascended master teachers, basically. And in front of me, there's this huge pile of black numbers, and they're giant numbers. And I finally have a human-like body again. And I reach down and pick up these numbers, throw them up in the air, and say, no wonder you love creating, because I realized that the universe is created in math. And I just was so fascinated and so overcome with joy about this fact and this knowledge. And it's like, I love creating too. And now that's the only really thing that happened in that space before I transitioned into a place reminiscent of Earth. So I'm still not aware of Earth or Bri, but this place, looking back in hindsight, is very kind of reminiscent of Earth. And this place is where there are other beings, and there's hundreds of them. And I've lost my human-looking body again. And most of us are dolls. We look like dolls. And it's just this most fascinating place. And I'm filled with pure curiosity. And I see these other beings sliding down trees that are covered in snow. And I have this thought, I don't think I like snow. And as soon as I have that thought, it turned to lush green. And I think, oh, that'd be a lot of fun. As soon as I have the thought, I'm sliding down the trees, having all the fun. And I'm starting to realize that, you know, my reality is being created with my thoughts. And then I have the realization that, oh my gosh, I'm seeing these other beings. What if they actually like snow and they're experiencing snow while I'm experiencing green, you know, lush moss trees, but we're having these experiences that are different, but together simultaneously. And it wasn't, you know, this huge mind-blowing thing that it is here on Earth. It was just like, that's cool. You know, and I didn't even think twice about it. It was just a kind of matter of fact. And I mentioned that they're beings because I didn't know if they had ever lived a human experience. I didn't know where their souls had been, where they were going, where they had come from. I understand it to be this kind of holding place. And this is the part of my experience that a majority of my experience was. So there's no time. So it's hard to say I spent the most time here, but it was definitely the most substantial part of my experience. And the thought creation was just absolutely instantaneous. There was a part where I was a snowman. Yes, I know the irony because I just mentioned I didn't like snow. You know, the universe has a quirky sense of humor, but I was a snowman for a portion of this experience, and I saw these other beings working on a machine with a huge flame coming out the end of it. And I just had the thought, what happens if I get too close? Will I melt? Well, as soon as you have the thought, it happens, and I'm close and I melted. And I'm just a puddle of eyes, and I have a thought, I wonder if anyone will put me back together. Of course, as soon as I had a thought, they put me back together. There's other times when I was interacting with these beings. We were kind of harmoniously stocking shelves of the store. And then on the other side of the storefront, there's this huge stage. And we all end up on the stage dancing as if we had choreographed for millennia. No one said a word. I never heard a thought. It just happened. We moved in unity. So all of these thoughts and all these interactions with these beings, I never heard anyone saying anything, whether verbally or telepathically. But things just happened, and we were just one, and it was very, I guess, just oneness. It was really, really interesting. The last notable part of this area, I was a robot, and I was trying to learn to fly, and absolutely terrible at it, and ended up hitting a pole and severing my arm. There was no pain, there was no fear, there was nothing, no negative emotions. It was just like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. And then I see it grow back, like reattach itself with ones and zeros. And I was just, once again, fascinated and overcome with joy and curiosity. So this, this experience, this part of my experience was just, really about thought creation and oneness and just curiosity and joy. And at the end of this place reminiscent of Earth, there was a barbed wire fence, and all the beings started to kind of gather along this fence, and there was an opening. You can't see, I couldn't see behind the fence. It was all blurry, but I knew I couldn't follow the beings that had gone through the opening to cross this barrier. I didn't have a choice. I didn't know what was beyond there. I knew I couldn't go. And that kind of transitions into the last part of my experience, where I'm in this dark room, this black room, and there are these 7 powerful beings behind me. I don't know who they are. They're more powerful than the master ascended teacher I met in the white room, but not as powerful as the creator that I met in the void. It's somewhere in between. And I don't see them, I just feel them behind me. And in front of me, there's this golden scroll, and it's unraveled, and there's a quill starting to write in beautiful, kind of floating, golden, sparkly script. And I just get so excited, and my ego comes back and realizes this is incredible information that is so overwhelming that no human should be seeing this. And that's the time my ego decided to come back and say, you're showing this to a human. I didn't even know I was a human, and my ego came back and ruined it all. It instantly rolled up, and I was snapped back into my body at that moment.
Wow. That experience is so powerful. I actually could feel myself tearing up a little bit in the beginning because the emotion's there. It's raw, So I know that there is kind of like a holding area, and I've heard that there are portals that if it's not your time and you're not ready, that you can't go through that, and you kind of just know it. There is an awareness. Do you think that scroll was like your life review kind of a thing, that was what you were looking at?
So, it beats me all the time. Every time I think about the story and the scroll, it's like, what was on there? Ego not come, it would be so amazing. So I still don't know to this day what was on that scroll, or what the meaning was, or why it was so powerful, and why my ego decided like it was so amazing that it had to come and boast about it. I'm still not sure.
Maybe it's still meant to be written, and that is why.
Well, and different aspects of my experience have come to fruition over the last 7 years. So it'll be 7 years next month. And the monks, I told you it took me 5 or 6 years to figure out that I think 6 years to figure out they're laughing because there's no such thing as death. That took me 6 years. And some information from my near-death tunnel came to me in a meditation, and that was 6 years later. The whole thought creation, that was about 6.5 years later, that I understood how relevant it is to this this reality, this life, how powerful our thoughts and our language really is. So things are slowly unveiling itself as time goes on. So I'm sure more information from the tunnel will come apparent, and some more experiences from that place reminiscent of Earth. And I really hope I get to see what's on that scroll.
Also want to know. It's like, oh, I just ended. So I know from more lore about the laughing Buddhas, because they are monks, is that they are laughing, and that they laughed. That was their healing, because fun and laughter and joy is what raises your vibration. So maybe there's something there as well. So tell me, okay, so now you're back in your body. Are you now healed?
Oh, so this getting back in my body was absolutely crazy. As soon as I re-entered my body, I felt my heart restart. So, even though I wasn't in a hospital, I know that my heart stopped because I felt it restart. And that is a really weird feeling. And even though I didn't know what just happened, I knew that I had been gone from my body, and I was positive it had been weeks or months. And I was petrified to open my eyes. I thought my family disregarded my wishes to be cremated, and they buried me, and I'm going to have to fight my way out of a coffin underground. And then I start freaking out because, oh my gosh, this is how you hear about the stories of people who are buried alive, and this is where the tales come from. And oh my God, I'm buried alive. And, I haven't moved, at all, and I haven't opened my eyes, and I'm just freaking out. And so before I open my eyes or find out where I am, I try to do self-hypnosis. I tried begging to go back. I tried slowing my breath. I tried relaxing my whole body. I tried to leave again. And nothing was working at all. And there came a time where I just realized I had to open my eyes and figure out where I was and what I was going to do. When I opened my eyes, I was still in my bedroom. And then I was like, well, okay, what day? I felt like I had been gone for months. And I was like, is it, a couple of weeks later? Is it, I just had no idea. So I looked at my cell phone, and it was the same day, 8 minutes later. And it was just like, what happened?
Wow. So obviously nobody knew because you were by yourself. Yeah, because there's no time. There's no time on the other side. So it's just a feeling of an experience. I suppose that's what time travel is, right? You just jump there, jump back, nothing changed. Okay, so what happened next?
Yeah, so that was the first re-entering my body craziness. And then my mom had flown down because she knew I was really sick. My mom and dad had come down. They knew I was in trouble. My dad heard from God, which has never happened before, and God told him I was under a demonic attack, and they flew down to see me. And I shared with my mom about this experience. And I knew nothing about, near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences, really out of bodies. I knew a little bit about, people who had died for, whatever reason. And my great grandma had 3 near-death experiences. But the only thing I ever knew about that was she came back saying, watch your words, and we're not meant to know everything.
Okay, that's not helpful. But,
to a young, and I never knew my great grandma. So, these had just been brief stories. She never shared, she never went in depth. I mostly heard about the ramifications that happened in her life because of them, not her actual experiences. So I told my mom, and my mom had known, she'd done research on these different types of experiences and was very familiar with some different near-deathers and their stories. She's a huge researcher, has always been. Her mom got her interested into the spiritual metaphysical world. But she stayed pretty quiet because she didn't want to get in trouble with the church. So she was always pretty quiet about all of this. But she early on helped me understand that when I saw auras, that they were gifts. And, you know, she tried to understand what I was seeing with these entities and ghosts. And my sister saw them too. My sister and I never told each other, but we both told her. So she was in the background trying to figure out what the heck was going on with her kids. And so she kind of she suggested, she's like, I think you had a near-death experience. And I was just like, no, that's not what happened. Even though twice in my experience, I realized I had died. And, you know, that would take years later to realize as well that my consciousness knew what had happened. But then I came back with even more gifts. I came back with medical intuition, and I could feel what was wrong with somebody. I felt it very real in my own body. If we went past a car accident, I could tell where the person was injured or if they had survived the accident. If they had whiplash, if they had seatbelt, issues. And, you know, it was very overwhelming. My dad has a bad knee. I could feel his knee. Just the list goes on. You have a pain, I could feel it. I could hear plants. Like I could hear their feelings. And that's crazy, right? And so, you know, all of this was super overwhelming. I started hearing people's thoughts, and that was a whole new scary thing. And it was just very overwhelming. I was confused by the density of this place. Walls really freaked me out. I was constantly like touching walls because I didn't understand their solidity. I felt like I'd been stuffed into a sausage casing. So the first year was incredibly difficult, and I actually tried to take extreme measures to get back to this place. I tried to commit suicide to go back home because it was so difficult. So because I'm in this whole realm of survival, I didn't realize I didn't have symptoms of myclonis dystonia.
Wow.
I was in a whole other world of confusion and just didn't even realize until my attempt was unsuccessful and I realized I needed to be here. And that attempt actually left me with a traumatic brain injury that I had to recover from for another 6 months. And only after all of that craziness did I understand, like, oh my gosh, I don't have any symptoms, which was a daily, second, every minute kind of phenomenon. That's how much confusion I was in, though, after this experience. Was I didn't even realize I didn't have these pains. And again, I had other people's pains. So, you know, I finally was like, well, maybe something happened. You know, I'll explore this near-death experience that my mom said I had. And I went to an IANS conference a year later, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And it was great. You know, I heard all these amazing stories, met amazing people, but no one had my story. You know, I didn't feel like that's what happened. You know, like I know for a fact that, you know, I had this experience. And especially with all the hellacious things and experiencing the demons and being exhausted and dying alone, you know, I felt like this, you know, they weren't my people either. I felt alone. So I did one more thing to try to kind of understand what was going on. And so I tried one more thing. I thought, you know, maybe talking about it would help. So I went and I was interviewed on Jeff Morris' podcast. And I was back in my old career, even though all this crazy tumultuous stuff happened, I still worked really hard at, you know, building the American dream, you know, climbing the corporate ladder and, you know, just doing your job very well, you know, work and home and work, sleep, repeat. So I did that throughout this whole thing. And I was back there at the time, but Jeff Morrow was still pretty small at this point. And so I thought it was safe that, you know, my coworkers wouldn't know. I hid my illness. I hid my experience. I thought it was a safe place. So knowing about Anita Morjani and some other people who had miraculous healings from near-death experience, I went on excited to share that my experience had cured my incurable disorder. And about 6 months later, it came back. And it came back with a vengeance. I mean, it started slow, but it, little twitches here and there, and it grew just like it grew when I was 10, and it had come back. And by 2020, it was pretty hellacious again. I was having a lot of dystonia, a lot of the myoclonic, episodes I would have to hide from my coworkers. And, I hid it from the world. And then COVID hit and the world got shut down. I became very isolated, and all the layoffs happened, and I ended up not being able to do much. Like, I was really tremoring and really starting to be unable to carry on a life, an independent life. So I gradually moved back in with my parents, and I just continued to go downhill. I tried to work, tried to keep working. I tried to have relationships. I tried to be independent, and everything was just failing. I felt like a failure. I felt like a fraud. I had shared that, I was cured, and then I wasn't, and my work was failing. My relationships were failing. I felt like I was failing. So that led to my mom, once again, always researching, always a warrior. And she found a gal that was going through deep brain stimulation surgery again for her myoclonus dystonia. Well, I was in really rough shape. I was not able to walk. I wasn't able to type or text. I was tremoring. I was exhausted. I was in pain. I really didn't know, how I was going to live a life like this. But I still had this weird reservation of hope, and ended up communicating with this gal. She introduced us to her neurologist. Her neurologist was like, "Oh my gosh, you need this surgery. You've needed this for ever, 20 years. Let's get you fast tracked." So I got the surgery, and it was pretty successful. But it came with a warning that myoclonus dystonia is very cunning and clever and loves to find a way around the surgery to recreate itself. So only a year after the surgery, I needed to go back and have this emergency appointment with my neurologist. And I figured that I was fine enough. That the surgery did better than anything else I'd ever done. I was going to work on my internal self. I was going to let the doctors, I finally had a good team. I mean, I'm talking 20 years of pretty bad doctors. There's a couple good ones here in between, but most of them either just didn't care, had issues of their own, prescribed dangerous medications, just these really bad experiences. There were a few very, very great ones that helped me out along the way, but I had a great team. I had a great primary care doctor. I had a great neurologist. I had a great surgeon, and a great team for once. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to let them deal with my body. I'm going to start working on my subconscious mind and, more internal work. And even though I'd looked into meditation before and some hypnosis, I knew there was more I could do, and I just needed to find out how. And the universe sent me this amazing woman, and she coached me for a month and said, "You need to go to this meditation retreat." And I said, okay. I didn't know anything about meditation really. I figured if you weren't born as a monk, you couldn't get these transcendental ones without drugs. And I knew of mindfulness meditation, which was, only really helpful in the, short-term trauma responses kind of stuff, but never really helped me long-term. I loved hypnosis. I even practiced some self-hypnosis. And so I was like, you know what? Okay, I really want to work on these inner parts of myself, my subconscious. I really want to have a conversation and reprogram, rewire some of these things that have been programmed in my life. And I went to this retreat and realized that I had been doing 21 years of shadow work. So I was constantly addressing, well, because we thought, maybe it was trauma that, brought on my myclonis dystonia. Maybe it was, something. So we're always doing things. I saw tons of psychiatrists, psychologists, did EMDR, always attacking traumas and emotions. And I had a great hypnotist that taught me NLP when I was a teenager. So all of these things, the language, the tackling the traumas, the emotions, changing your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. I had been doing this already without knowing really what it was, that it was shadow work or the dark night of the soul. But because I had been doing all of this, only 2 weeks into learning this new type of meditation, and I was at this meditation retreat, and all of this, on the second day, all of a sudden I get back into the void, and it is amazing. I had the language to get back to the place that was reminiscent of my near-death experience. Oh my gosh, everything is here. All possibilities, all energy. And it was just absolutely incredible. I had no idea that getting back to this place was possible without, committing suicide. So I was ecstatic, and parts of my near-death tunnel came, and I saw it go through my heart and into my brain and start rewiring and changing things. And then at this meditation retreat, I got more language and more understanding that healing is possible for anyone. And I heard, all these history of miraculous healings, people who had healed from these types of meditation retreats, people from ALS, MS, blindness, deafness, cancer. The one that really piqued my interest was Parkinson's, because myclonis dystonia is so similar and related. Yeah. And even the brain, it's very close. That's why the surgery I had was originally invented for Parkinson's patients. So that piqued my interest, and everything started making sense when I was a kid. I really clung on to the fact Jesus said, you can do all this and more. I was like, I can do all this and more? I can heal people. I can move, I can change objects, I can change matter. And so all of the language of my life just blew up, and all my experiences, all these practices and holistic modalities that we had reached out to, it all started making sense. And I understood why my condition came back. And it's because I didn't know that I could get back. I didn't know I could go into a realm of infinite possibilities. I didn't know I had to change. I went back into my old identity, my old thoughts, my old feelings, my old actions, and in my old identity lay my old condition. And our body is, so programmed, it loves to run on default. And I had 20 some years of my body running on this program. And so because I went back to running on basically the same programs, the same illness was created. And it just made a ton of sense. And then, of course, by being able to understand all of these different things that played a huge role into my healing, I understood I also needed to learn how to heal myself so I could help others. I could teach others how to heal themselves, because it is absolutely possible. There are so many conditions, and it's not even through just meditation. There are so many different ways people have these miraculous curings of incurable illnesses, detrimental brain injuries, multiple sclerosis with scarring of the brain they see on scans, and they heal and it's completely gone. I mean, it's just people I know, it's incredible. So my whole experience, every single step of the way, the crazy spiritual stuff I experienced, not understanding, it allowed me to see that there was a world beyond our 3D physical one, which what came into huge play. And then the illness, why it came, why it, why it ended up in a near-death experience, why the illness had to come back, why I had to learn how to heal it. And it all, steps me into my soul's purpose. And really, without any of that, I'd still probably be in construction, struggling. Or I never gave up. There was a lot of times of hopelessness and frustration and depression, but I never fully gave up. And I said, there's got to be a reason. And I never thought I would actually live to see the reason and be on the other side of the entities and the illness. But luckily, the dark entities never came back after my near-death experience, which is good. I'm glad I don't need to learn more about that experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because one of the other guests that I interviewed, he said when he got to a heaven's door, these dark entities can't go that high. Mm-hmm. That's how he got rid of them, because they cannot get there. They can't vibrate at that frequency, so they're forced to kind of go and find somewhere else. Do you think that's what happened?
So another fascinating part of my experience, I'm under this demonic attack. I've been attached for 16 years and, had pretty hellish experiences here on Earth. And even when I astral traveled, whole nother craziness, I ran into these low vibrational energies. But because I called out and I surrendered and I asked for, the God I believed in to come save me, I find I'm now part of a lot of distressing experience groups. Well, there's one in particular that meets every month. But people who die and go to hell, when they call out, they are saved and they're brought into the light. I think that happened to me just in the earthly realm, because they were ripped from me. And in my experience, I was renamed to 1048. I don't share this too often because there's a lot of questions I can't answer that I get asked after sharing. But I think a few weeks after I came back and, shared with my mom and sister about this experience, I told them, so I was renamed. And, thinking about it doesn't sound too crazy because I was raised with the Bible, and several people in the Bible have been renamed after experiences with God and Jesus. Yeah. So it wasn't too crazy. The crazy part was I was renamed a number.
Yeah.
And so I didn't understand the importance of it, but my mom, who also loves research and loves just anything she could get her hands and mind onto, she had read and kind of studied a little bit about the geometry of the Bible, or numerology of the Bible, the significance of numbers. And so I don't know how she put it in or how she looked it up, but what she looked up, it's some equation, you plug into the geometry of craziness. I do not understand it. I should probably study it and figure it out. But she plugged in 1048 and it put her to 2 Samuel 22:18. For he saved me from my strong enemy, from those that hated me, for they are too strong for me. And it just came over us like a crazy wave of electricity. Like we were all just...
Yeah, I just got goosebumps now.
Yeah, I get goosebumps when I talk about it. It was exactly what happened. I was saved from an enemy that hated me and that was too strong for me. And how do you pull out that one verse in the whole freaking book out of 1048? That's definitely, I was saved, I was rescued. But since then, I no longer fear them because now I do vibrate on a much higher level. I know I won't encounter them in my meditations because I go there out of love. and gratitude. Where when I was astral traveling, I was still vibrating low. I was depressed. I was sick. I was hurting. I didn't want to. So I ended up in these dimensions with these dark entities. So they attached because I was already vibrating low. You know, the whole, I think the illness started first and then the entities attached to that. And that's why I got attached. My sister didn't. My sister wasn't sick. We lived in the same house. We had the same experiences. We had the same family, the same upbringing. We're less than 2 years apart. She wasn't sick, and I was. And that was a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, they say you get holes in your aura, so they're able to be vulnerable so they can get in. And of course, they're feeding off you. Why would they let go? I mean,
yeah. Gosh, I was a great person to feed off of. I had anxiety, depression, pain, OCD from my illness, and then they could exasperate it by, you know, having apparitions and plaguing my nightmares, and there was no escape for me. So I was the perfect person. And then, of course, I'm super determined, super stubborn. So I fought like hell to keep surviving. I was the perfect host. I was like unlimited food.
Yeah. So now you're a death doula. So how did that come about? Because obviously you quit your old job because you can't keep playing out that same program, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I finally, 6 months after brain surgery, yeah, I was still having a hard time. And I mean, heck, it was brain surgery, trying to recover from that and trying to figure out what to do next. And, you know, my loving parents, after I got a wonderful job offer, you know, it was going to be a lot of work, a new company, and well, an old company with new branch. I was going to be very responsible. It was going to be very stressful. And they said, why don't you turn it down and you come stay with us and heal? You've never taken time for yourself to heal. Which I haven't. Like I said, I always push. I'm always determined. I'm always go, go, go. It is both a huge blessing and a huge curse. You know, I'm very proud of that fact, but it has huge repercussions. So I understood the gravity of the situation, and I said goodbye to that job. And saying goodbye to that offer, I knew I was saying goodbye to my career, but I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. Something that helped me kind of process my experience was to volunteer at hospice. So 2 years after my experience, or even one, it was shortly after, I was so drawn to volunteer for hospice. And I think Kathy McDaniel said it the best. I only recently heard her say this, but it's selfish. We want to be close to that experience again. You know, I knew I was so excited for where they're going. I could hold this authentic energy and just maybe get a glimpse of it. So, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I couldn't do what you did, you know, what you do when you volunteer for hospice. Oh, that must be really hard. But I'm like, I know where they're going, and it's so exciting. And people, you know, so I did that while I was working my construction job. I'd volunteer on the weekends. And I did that for about 2 years and absolutely loved it. But then I got a job offer in another state here in the US, and started working that. And right when I was looking into possibly finding another place to volunteer in this new location, COVID hit and shut the world down. No more volunteer. So, you know, I kind of let that go and didn't realize how big that would come into play later on. So a few months after, you know, I let go of my corporate career, I'm getting antsy. You know, I'm supposed to take a year off to recover and, you know, maybe find what I want to do. Well, a year is more like 3 months in my life. So I started looking into all the things that touched my heart. So I love to cook. I, you know, tried being a private chef. I tried catering. I, you know, tried working some events because I love people. I love social interaction. I love the hubbub of events. I tried house and dog sitting, you know, for people who wanted someone to watch their dog in their own home, and I thought that would be really cool. But you know, I was also looking into, I found a thing called a death doula. And when I started looking into it, I realized it was so much more than hospice. I mean, there were so many different avenues and so many places I could take it. So there's no regulation, at least in the US, for becoming a death doula right now. It's not a regulated field, but I thought, it'd be nice to get a certification anyway and have a little, more in-depth training and knowledge of it. So I took a course, beautifully written, got certified as a death doula, and launched, a little death doula business. And the places it has taken me, oh my gosh, I never would have expected. I really expected, I'd be privately hired to help people transitioning, in that last stages of their life. But it's ended up being so much more. I have been able to help couples plan for, accidents and help them have that conversation about what they want, if they're incapacitated, do they want life support? Do they want life sustaining measures? How long do they want it? Why, have these conversations that sometimes couples just don't have until it's too late, and then they can't have them. And then their loved ones are struggling. So these advanced directives. And then I've had quite a few clients that really are struggling because there's a disconnect in their family. We all have family relationship issues. It's part of the human experience. But trying to deal with that, and, they really want their grandkids to know who they were. They don't want their spirit or their willpower and their knowledge just to fade out of existence with them. So I've helped them create legacy projects. I've been asked to accompany clients on bucket list trips. So I knew that I would love to help them plan bucket list trips, but I didn't imagine I'd be asked to accompany them as, support and as a death doula, as a confidant, So I got to go on my first ever bucket list trip. And not only was my client so elated with the whole experience, but her family was appreciative. Their family didn't have the time, the energy, the resources to be able to she's, almost 90. They didn't have all the things they needed to be able to do this for her, where I could. And that was such an incredible, honoring moment. Of course, I get the typical death doula request, helping planning living funerals. I'm also an ordained minister, so I can lead funerals, whether they're living or post-death funerals, memorials. And of course, if, someone's in the hospital, I have a to-go bag packed, and I am there. I am there as long as you need me. Whether that's, if you call me or someone calls me and says, hey, this might be the end, I'm there. And if it turns out to be the end, I'm there. If it turns out to be, something else, I only leave when it's appropriate. So when they're calm, they understand next steps in transitions and stuff. I've been asked to help move people from nursing homes that have closed down. Just the extent of all these things I get to do for people where there's not a lot of resources in this industry. And then adding on the fact I now know how to teach people how to heal themselves. Now I'm not just a death doula, I'm a death and spiritual doula. So whether you're, transitioning out of this life or you want to prepare for that, I can help you there. Or if you still have a lot of life to live and you're suffering from a chronic illness, I can teach you the ways that you can break free of it. So it is the most amazing thing to finally be living my soul's purpose. I just saw a quote that you will never settle into something you weren't meant to. So my corporate career, my, all these other things that I've tried, I wasn't meant to settle in it, or I never settled in it because I wasn't meant to. And it is just so peaceful and exciting to know that I'm just in the flow with what my soul really wanted for me the whole time.
Yeah, you know it's your purpose when you say, I get to do this, not I have to do this.
Yes. And gosh, all the things I get to do, it's so rewarding. And when I first left the corporate job career I had, I was really upset. I thought I'd made a huge mistake. What was I doing? Where was I going? What was all this about? So I still didn't know much about meditation. So I did my own little like self-hypnosis slash exhaustion kind of got into this other realm where I was still very much physically here, but also in the place of answers. And I asked, what am I doing? And there was a lot of different things that happened in that space, but the biggest thing I was told was it was time to stop feeding my ego and start feeding my soul. And I realized my profession in the construction industry, I fed my ego. It felt great. I was very good at my job. I could crank out amazing proposals quickly, efficiently, and successfully, winning projects. But that did nothing for my soul. And here it's like, my ego takes a back seat and my soul is so fulfilled.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's no more corporate for you.
Yeah. And sometimes, the thoughts will come like, oh, it'd be so easy to make, that money I was making, I could find a job real fast. And it's like, for what? Why would you want to go back to your old thoughts, your old patterns? That's how you recreated your condition. And why would you do all that when you know you can do all this? So yeah, no going back for me.
Good. People say birth's a great experience and death is a terrible experience, but it's not the case. It's that entry and exit from spirit world, and people have got the wrong opinion because they see it as something macabre, but it's not at all. It's something that is beautiful, and you're able to, because you've seen the other side. And I suppose it's just because people question it, but there should be more of that actually, because there used to be. In the tribal days, there were doulas, and now nobody does that. I mean, you can, like you say, officiate, have a funeral, everybody goes home and forgets about it. Just move on,
Yeah, I actually built a course really about the whole life and death and different cultures and religions and the history. And we go through cycles as societies that, we romanticize death, and you see it everywhere. You see it in art and statues and text and cultures and religions and doulas and at-home funerals and at-home death and all this stuff. And then we see it decline and no one wants to talk about it. It's scary, it's taboo, it's pushed under the rug. It was pushed to the hospitals. But we are back on an uptick. So, I love finding other death doulas. I just met my first ever spiritual midwife, which, I'm also a spiritual midwife. Midwife to the afterlife is what I call myself, as the death doula. But you're absolutely right. Birth and death are both absolutely beautiful. But we cherish birth because we get to see that experience progress. We're scared of death because we don't know what's on the other side. We don't know what's going to happen. But all it is a transition of energy, a soul coming into the 3D physical world and a soul leaving it and exiting it. So I'm here to help that transition.
Yeah. I always say it's interesting that when you're born, the baby cries, and when you die, everyone else does.
Yes, I love that.
It's just that way.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've got a course. How can people find you?
Yeah, the best way to find me is on my website, which is BRI0NICLLC.com. And there you can connect with me. You can find my books, you can find my email, you can find my socials. If you want to take one of my courses, I suggest you just contact me because I can guide you to the right course. You won't find them on my website just because I want to make sure the right person is taking the right course.
Yeah, lovely. Well, I'll post the links below as well. Do you have a message for our viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very similar to what my great grandma, passed down for generations. Is I'll expand on hers though. She said, "Watch your words." But I will tell you, the power of thought and the power of language is so instrumental to creating your own reality.